I just can't believe how radically eating meat has changed me constitutionally, but don't take my word for it.
I was gonna say, that's amazing.
That's the first time I've had abs in my whole life. What?
All right, you got abs now, do you, Russ? Oh, hello there, you awakened wonders.
Hello there, you awakening wonders.
You gorgeous, radiant, shimmering celestial beings swirling around in this great cosmic teacup of consciousness and curiosity. Gather around because today we may discuss something truly divine, something miraculous, something that transcends mere biology and into the metaphysical. Apparently, I've discovered something absolutely extraordinary. Abs! Yes, abs! That's my best Russell. I used to be a fan of the Trues.
I'd like some trues.
I miss when he only reported true news, but today we gotta cover this.
Tell me the science behind this.
He recently, on his podcast, hosted the Carnivore MD, Paul Saladino. It's like I can hear Russell now.
Paul Saladino.
Saladino, that's his literal surname. Little Salad, a man named after lettuce, become the high priest of steak, not just the White House raw milk peddling dairy fairy of the Maha movement.
This is a Maha podcast.
The literal Maharishi of meat, the bull testicle terminator.
It's a raw bull testicle.
He convinced me to go from vegan all the way to carnivore.
So when you are not eating meat as a vegan, it's very, very hard to get these nutrients that are central to human thriving, right?
Look, Russell, I don't really want to have to resort to personal anecdotes, but firstly, if showing off your abs really moves the needle, then I guess I haven't worn a low V-neck since I was a worship leader, but I guess I can just...
Don't take my word for it.
I was gonna say, that's amazing.
You know, that's 15, almost 16 years of eating only plants. So it's not like there's some magic nutrient in meat that gives you abs, first and foremost. Secondly, Carnivore MD demonizes plants as poison in his carnivore code book that he's promoting on the podcast. But when he himself was on a strict flesh-only carnivore diet, he had to shift after reporting sleep disturbances, heart palpitations, muscle cramps, and even low testosterone levels. He's even quoted saying that it's probably not a good thing for most humans.
We eat food for humans, which I would define meat and plants, right?
But he continues to promote carnivore in his book. Why would he do that? Well, it probably has something to do with his organ harvesting. He literally has a $50 million per year organ supplement company partnered with Liver King, or should I say Kink, because they have this trippy fetish about consuming bull testicles.
And unfortunately, he's in business with the Liver King.
Liver King has recently been spiraling, posting concerning videos, threatening Joe Rogan, and even getting arrested for that. And rumors are circulating from his inner circle that he actually has colon cancer, and he's afraid to let the world know because it might hurt the organ harvesting sales. Recently hit with multiple 60-day notices this month for violating California's Proposition 65, alleging his supplements expose consumers to PFOAs and PFNAs, or forever chemicals that he's always raging on about.
Aren't we ultimately poisoning and toxifying ourselves?
Absolutely, we are. Will not tell you this. Did I lose you?
No, Paul, I wanted to run you through some of my new products from Reborn. Reborn! Everything's leading to our Lord to being reborn. We are going to glorify his name, but I need your support. You know I've got a trial next year, so support me in the best way you can by acquiring these glorious new products of mine. Beef tallow, baby. Mwah! It's only for cooking, don't use it in massages. Tallow balm, look at me. Young, rejuvenated. Look at these abs. Look at these guys. Bovine colostrum. That's the sweet first fruits of the udder. Why wait around till the calf has sucked out all of the best bits? Bovine colostrum. Is that a good idea?
Here we go. It all makes sense now. Russell is launching Reborn, his animal-based supplement products, just like Carnivore MD and Liver King does. One has to ask a question. What are the intentions behind this?
Is there any threat or danger making a film like this?
Yeah, you just wait and see.
My name's Kip. My previous films exposed collusion with government, big pharma, and non-profit health and environmental organizations.
This controversial documentary,
it's filled with a lot of propaganda.
My name is Cam, and my entire life was church. I even had a career as a Christian musician. Recently, I had to take a step back and question, what would Jesus do?
Does everybody have their WJD bracelets on?
What would he do to kill an animal? Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal?
That I have no idea.
Interesting question.
Is there
there a right way to kill a beast?
What did Jesus do? You only have to look at the temple.
Imagining Jesus with a knife in his hand, slitting the throat of a lamb.
Justified imagery of blood on the streets.
We're talking rivers of blood. Thousands and thousands of animals.
So many animals are being slaughtered, just like they were then. It's still happening today.
Back to the educated topic. Tell me how religious doctrine ever made it profit.
The Temple Mount was the major driver of the economy that was functioning at that time.
The temple is the fulcrum of the conflict, that's for sure, and the red heifers are the start of that.
When going against mainstream beliefs, you can expect to be threatened.
My place has been completely ransacked. $10,000 worth of equipment.
Temple committee put the bounties on our heads to kill us.
Jesus Christ was crucified for striking at the root of all there is that is evil.
There's a lot of killing, a lot of blood going on.
The constructive war.
We're closer to a World War III type event than we were yesterday.
Oppression of people.
We're living through the modern day Holocaust.
Because they're just animals.
Look close enough. We can see the hints in paintings and scripture.
Scriptures have been really tampered with.
History is the province of the winners, and now we're living with the consequences.
It's easier to cover up the truth than to talk about it.
I think we need to wrap things up.
I think I have to take this.
So I'm not one to typically jump on call-outs because of cancel culture and all that, but I did want to address this recent podcast with Russell Brand because he actually engaged us in the conversation years ago when he talked about my co-director of Christspiracy, Kip Anderson's previous film on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Watch the documentary called What the Health. Have you seen it?
It's filled with a lot of propaganda and nonsense.
Propaganda. Damn, those guys again, like the Nazis. I remember them. But that documentary, What the Health, that I watched was like, and I've been vegetarian for years, and this said stuff like, the Diabetes Association, they are funded by these meat and dairy organisations and these pharmaceutical companies. The cancer organisation, similarly.
He was so stirred up about the film exposing the collusion between Big Pharma and animal agriculture that he even had Kip on his own podcast.
This is in the film. They're giving us studies that are funded by the animal agriculture industry, and they don't realize it.
All of the information that's refuting it is sourced by, funded by, infiltrated by meat industry, dairy industry.
And after, we even had conversations with him about Christspiracy, and we even considered making him an executive producer. But the conversation has shifted to not only Russell consuming animal flesh, but he's recently had the Carnivore MD on his podcast, Paul Saladino. Let's go through the full podcast and see where things go, and we'll respond to some of the points along the way.
Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me for Stay Free with Russell Brand today with Paul Saladino, MD. You are going to love this interview. I became a carnivore because of this man. He's written books about being a carnivore, and he convinced me to go from vegan all the way to carnivore. It's brilliant. It's a fantastic conversation that covers the kind of holiness that comes to mind when you hear the intricate beauty of the way that the human body works, right down to the subcellular level, and what I would have to describe as a kind of...
See, this is wild. They're already using this language about holiness with the human body and the consumption of flesh. I think this is by no means an accident. I think that the film Christspiracy is actually making some waves, and you see it in other demographics like the Biblio diet. Recently, Dr. Amen had on Josh Axe, and I think Jordan Rubin is his name. They've written this diet called the Biblio diet, which promotes eating animal flesh from the Bible. And one of their references that went viral was saying that King Solomon ate all of this red meat.
What did the characters in the Bible eat? And one of our most surprising things, we get into one chapter on, it's called Solomon's Provisions, and it actually details in the Bible what Solomon ate. Number one thing by far was meat, and it's red meat. Loads of it.
Well, the reality is King Solomon also had a harem of thousands of wives, and he summoned demons in his Keys of Solomon. So I don't really think he's our, best example of what we should be doing. But I will say, King Solomon did say in Ecclesiastes 3:18 and 19 that man and animals share the same ruach, the same breath, and as one dies, so dies the other. And it's actually a test so that man learns that we are like the animals. So I do think that's some good wisdom there.
And what I would have to describe as a kind of demonic evil in institutionalized food production. This is a Maha podcast. This is a Make America Healthy Again podcast.
And see, there he is again, using the term demonic in terms of the industrial system. Now, it's in the past, he used that same type of language or that same type of alarmism when he had the realization of the connection between big pharma and animal agriculture.
It's an economic matter. Economic interests vested in maintaining those industries in spite of health risks, in spite of ecological impact, in spite of cruelty. And people that are capable of being cruel to animals, it seems, I would guess, is a kind of rupture between that person and their sort of knowledge of us all sort of feeling pain, a kind of a sort of an impeded compassion or something. I imagine if you and I talked about institutional or orthodox religion and the way that it is structured and the way that power is deployed, prejudice enacted, violence underwritten, I reckon we'd probably agree.
And the truth is that there is a direct connection to ritual blood sacrifice, which is what we show in our film Christspiracy, temple, blood, occult, ritual sacrifice that evolves into the modern slaughterhouse system. So we're not just talking about this secular food system. There is a real ritual and, dare I say, demonic component to it. This is reflected in scriptures throughout. Jesus saying in the book of John that the thief, the enemy, Satan, comes to steal, kill, and that word kill is the Greek thysea, which literally means to slay an animal in ritual sacrifice and destroy. But Jesus says he comes to bring life abundantly, and he's the good shepherd who lays his life down for the sheep, a restoration of true dominion and the Garden of Eden ideal, which we'll talk about in this podcast. But I just wanted to say that there's this idea that this demonic energy is 100% irremovable from killing another living being in a ritual sacrifice. And you might not think that just consuming an animal for a hamburger is a ritual sacrifice, but as I've said before in other podcasts, isn't 3 meals a day a ritual? It's a different kind of ritual. And I've talked about this at length as well on a podcast with my buddy, Dr. Naco Longo, on the Old World Florida podcast. We did a whole 5-hour live stream about the connection between fast food and the meat industry and blood ritual sacrifice and adrenaline in the blood and the ways that it actually activates this kind of aggressive, psychosomatic, almost mind control device in those who consume in such a way that they become like a host for this entity-like aggression. So anyways, I don't want to divulge too much into that, but I can't get past the fact that this language about the demonic is being inverted from a literal death industry to talking about, it seems like, consuming plants, which is God's literal commandment in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis 1:29, as well as the vision of the peaceful kingdom of heaven, which all the world is returning to when we restore that same kingdom. But I digress.
Podcast that covers concepts like nutrition and vaccines and wellness.
Also, again, right here, sorry to keep stopping, but he brings up the term vaccines in regards to talking about this corrupt, demonic system of agriculture. But the reality is I don't think he knows that the term vaccine itself comes from the Latin word vacca, which means cow. Why is that? Because the first inoculations, the first vaccines were actually created in the livestock industry by taking sick cows with cowpox and injecting their diseased material into well cows to build herd immunity. So wherever you stand on vaccines and that whole debacle that's happened since COVID, wherever you stand on germ theory versus terrain theory, I'm more on the terrain theory side. All of it's explained by the fact that animals are not meant to be confined to these hardcore, defiled conditions where they're in their own blood and feces and everything. That breeds an environment for dis-ease. And then we as humans, in our sedentary and domesticated lives that we live in most of our civilized societies, that dis-ease then hits our circumstantial terrain and it makes it in such a way that when we ingest these foods, we have a high likelihood of passing this kind of zoonotic dis-ease. And then now you've got a problem, and you create the reaction and the solution by having more and more vaccinations and creating a massive business and money flow for the pharmaceutical industry.
anywhere other than Rumble Premium, get Rumble Premium. You get more content. It's an ad-free experience, and you will just love it. More content from me, more from Crowd.
Also making a note that Russell's promoting his Rumble channel here, which, you know, everybody's got to make money. It's understandable, but I can't help but notice that Russell is dropping this podcast just days before he launches his very own supplement company called Reborn, which is selling colostrum and beef tallow. So timing seems a little bit suspicious.
Paul Saladino, thank you so much for joining me for Stay Free with Russell Brand.
It's good to see you again, my friend.
You look well. Now, last time we spoke, I was a vegan. I wasn't a Christian yet. Obviously, I've been through quite a lot publicly as well, and we can touch upon that if you want to. But I've got...
Yeah, actually, many may not know that Russell was actually a vegetarian and or vegan for quite a lot of his adult life, I'm pretty sure. So this transition has been a recent one, and it's right off of the back end of him converting to Christianity after also being someone who was deeply entrenched in the Hollywood system, a lot of self-professed hedonism, sexual addiction, substance abuse. He's been through the Alcoholics Anonymous program, and he's really big on abstinence-based recovery from both substance and sexual addiction. But it's also interesting that now he's turning, after going full Christian, into this kind of lust of the flesh, if you will, where what I don't know if he realizes that the early Christian tradition from the father of church history, Eusebius, he notes that all the earliest Christian apostles abstained from wine and flesh. So they saw both of these things together. Jesus is quoted in the Aramaic version of the Gospel of Luke, which actually comes from as early as the 2nd century, saying, "Beware that your hearts do not become hardened and heavy with the consumption of flesh and intoxication." Now, this was actually reworked in our Greek Gospels by replacing the word flesh with dissipation, which is actually redundant with the word intoxication, because dissipation just means drunkenness. So you can see how not only are we experiencing a real-time twisting of the narrative with these kinds of conversations, but this is something that's been happening for 2,000 years when you have the early Christians talking about this. And not only that, the leader of the movement after Jesus' death, James the Just, is noted as abstaining from wine and flesh from his mother's womb. Wholly from his mother's womb, it says, from 5 different church fathers. So Russell is someone who really advocates for abstinence-based recovery from substance abuse like alcohol. I find it very interesting that now, in his Christian realization and conversion, he's now pushing in the direction, or the opposite direction, of what these earliest Christians were doing.
One thing I want to say is I just can't believe how radically eating meat has changed me constitutionally, but don't take my word for it.
I was going to say, that's amazing.
I didn't use that. That's the first time I've had abs in my whole life. What's going on?
Look, Russell, I don't really want to have to resort to personal anecdotes, but firstly, if showing off your abs really moves the needle, then I guess I haven't worn a low V-neck since I was a worship leader, but I guess I can just...
I was going to say, that's amazing.
You know, that's 15, almost 16 years of eating only plants. So it's not like there's some magic nutrient in meat that gives you abs, first and foremost.
Tell me the science behind this.
I mean, you just think about it. Humans throughout our history have always treasured meat. You look at any group of hunter-gatherers on the planet now, and they treasure meat. It's at the top of their sort of hierarchy of foods they want to eat.
So just really quickly on this indigenous tribal element of killing and hunting animals for food, we interviewed a shaman and also a before First Nation Native American about this issue. And though there was some killing of animals in indigenous tribes of the Americas, for instance, this was communicated as a very sad thing that happened only in survival situations when resources were thin. And often they saw it as their own, I guess, misuse of resources that led to the point where they had to do things like kill buffalo. And through that process, they actually lost communication with the buffalo, and it was a very sad disconnection from the animal totem kingdom that they had previous to that. But by and large, if you look at the evidence from the Choctaw Nation, the Creeks, Cherokees, Yamasee, Seminoles, even the Aztecs and the Mayans, you see this heavy push or side where everyone is pretty much predominantly, if not fully, plant-based. Even some of the tribes wearing linen. The three sisters of corn, beans, and squash was their primary protein source. So the list goes on that indigenous populations actually didn't prefer to hunt and kill animals. It wasn't like the highest form of their spirituality as he's communicating here. Also, it's worth noting that this is just an appeal to tradition fallacy anyways, meaning that we can't really look to what we've done in the past to justify what we're doing now and making it right because we did it in the past. The same way that, you know, we owned slaves in the past, but it doesn't make or justify owning slaves now in this day and age.
So when you are not eating meat as a vegan, which is, you know, that's your right. You're a sovereign human. You can make an intentional choice. It's very, very hard to get these nutrients that are central to human thriving, right? And I listed them out last time, and I'll give you a sense of them again. Things like creatine, which gets a lot of press today, but other things like carnitine or anserine or taurine, all of these nutrients, they're critical. Did I lose you?
No.
I love how he's all lost in thought. It's almost like I wonder what he's processing right there, because the truth is I'm not going to weigh in here too much because I'm not a doctor. I defer more to other doctors like Dr. Matthew Nagra or nutritionists like Simon Hill, who talk extensively about how these nutrient deficiencies aren't the kind of problem that people like Paul Saladino paint. In fact, most of these amino acids that he'll bring up, we actually produce in our own human body. There's outliers like B12, for instance, which actually comes from the soil. Therefore, because our soil is so depleted, the animals that Carnivore MD and now Russell Brand are eating, they actually have to be injected with B12, or most meat eaters should be taking a B12 supplement in general. So it's not just like a vegan or a plant-based thing that this is an issue. But outside of that, I know in my own personal life, I take very little supplements, and I do it just to be safe, but I know that I get everything that I need from my diet. And I, again, defer to these plant-based doctors and studies that have shown time and time again that everyone can thrive on a plant-based diet at all ages and stages of life.
And I suppose, like, as we discussed previously, I was a vegetarian from the age of 14 because I love Morrissey and I love the Smiths, and someone showed me footage of abattoirs and the way that animals are treated, which I thought was appalling then and I think is appalling now.
So that's interesting. Number one, awesome that he's a Morrissey fan. It's really cool to see the way that rock and roll and the punk movement has put forth this issue of exploitation of animals. And like he said, since the rise of this kind of punk rock-esque counterculture movement to really show what's going on in these slaughterhouses, you have now where people like Russell Brand have had moments where they've been able to see the atrocities of what actually goes on in animal agriculture, because most of that is hidden behind walls. There's a famous saying that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, then everybody would stop eating animals, right? Well, what I find interesting is Russell is someone who's so big on free speech, on I don't want to be censored, but what he doesn't realize is that these counterculture activists who have created the footage that shows what's really going on in animal agriculture have been put at the top of the terrorist list under the Patriot Act. And not only that, they've faced jail time and sentences up to 10, 15 years for this stuff. So for someone who is so anti-censorship, I think Russell should really consider that animal activist and talking about the animal agriculture industry and exposing its abuses, even if it's true, can land you jail time and put you at the top of the terrorist list in America.
Now, today, with the Patriot Act, it doesn't matter if you're correct now. Now, if you have an action, like you make a documentary, you do something that adversely affects that industry or any industry where they can prove they're losing money, by the Patriot Act, you're legally complicit, or you're legally guilty, right? Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, well, so there was a law created called the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and it was focused on just animal rights activists and environmental rights activists. And the law says anyone who disrupts the business of an animal enterprise is committing an act of terrorism.
Jesus fucking Christ, that's scary.
Right? I mean, because then that goes, it's so far reaching. That's from someone who saves one chicken from a farm, or someone who does a protest, or, I mean, there's 3 activists up in the Bay who were arrested under the law for doing passing out leaflets and doing chalk outlines on sidewalks. It's just crazy. Total violation of First Amendment.
That's so fucking wrong. It's so wrong and so dangerous when you let an industry just dictate, just by sheer money, what people can and can't protest, things that people find morally reprehensible. There's a reason why there's these ag-gag laws. What ag-gag laws, if you're not aware, if you listen to this, there's laws against taking film footage of those pigs that are shoved into those cages and chickens shoved into cages and cruelty to animals. If you've ever watched any of those disturbing videos that PETA puts up, where they'll show like a guy like shearing wool and kicking the shit out of the lamb, it's hard to watch, man. It's weird. Or is it a sheep or a lamb? Lamb is a young one, right? Is that what it is? Yeah. These guys, like, you think, oh, I'm wearing wool. It's just they just give them a haircut. Bullshit. They beat the fuck out of those things because those things don't want a haircut. And they bleed because they're not gentle with those shears. Ugh. Obviously, I don't know if it's just one time that they filmed this and it's just one asshole. But there's laws against filming those things now. So the only way that ever stops, the only way people ever go, hey, man, I'm only going to eat free-range this or grass-fed that, the only way that happens ever is you have to know what the consequences of not doing that are. You have to know if you're buying this factory-raised meat, this is how it lives. Are you cool with that? Most people are not cool with that. So instead of fixing it and making it better, they make it illegal to report all this unethical, fucked up, dark shit they're doing to animals. That's so fucking anti-American at every level.
And not only that, Jesus himself was crucified as a terrorist after turning the tables and freeing the animals from the ritual blood temple cult of his day, something that we talk about in Christspiracy. So definitely topics that I think Russell should take a second listen or look at.
There's been a spate of documentaries, even within the last 5 years, that sort of made the claim that you don't need meat. And in fact, meat is bad for you. And it's actually, your arteries and cholesterol.
So Russell here is talking about documentaries which talk about this plant-based lifestyle and exposing the animal agriculture industry and pharmaceuticals, etc. And he's talking about my co-director of Christspiracy, Kip Anderson, and his co-director Keegan Kuhn's previous films, Cowspiracy and What the Health. So he actually brought up What the Health on Joe Rogan, where he talked about the collusion with the pharmaceutical industry and the animal agriculture industry. But even Joe Rogan himself brought Keegan and Kip on to the Joe Rogan podcast to talk about Cowspiracy, and he was completely shocked by the data. He was shocked by factory farming.
Your documentary is very scary. It's one of those documentaries where you can look at a lot of documentaries and go, well, there's a bias in this documentary, and these guys, they're thinking that the negative aspects of this outweigh the positive aspects of it, but it's debatable. When you look at your documentary, it's one of those things where you go, whew, like I shut it off after it was over. It was like when you look at the devastation that's being done with livestock in this country, when you soberly look at it, you soberly look at the numbers, you soberly look at the amount of land they need to graze, when you soberly look at the amount of methane that's being produced by cow shit and cow farts, and then the reaction that you guys got when you tried to bring up that aspect of it. That was the weirdest part of your documentary. Didn't anticipate that you would get the kind of resistance that you got from activists that are scared of that industry.
Yeah.
What was it like making that documentary?
That was actually more of the motivation was that these environmental groups, the Greenpeace's, Rainforest Action Network, Sierra Club, that they didn't address this issue was more of inspiration to make the film and pissed us off to the point of making the film more than actual facts themselves. The facts are so overwhelming when I found them out, but the fact that they didn't talk about this, I felt betrayed. And then, once I started calling them, it became really kind of pissed off.
This is Kip Anderson talking, by the way, and Keegan Kuhn is the other gentleman to his right.
But not long after hosting that podcast, he ended up taking it down. And since then, he's gone carnivore himself and then come back off of it.
When I did the carnivore diet before, I did an entire month with nothing but meat. I ate mostly ribeye steaks, and if I ate lean game meat, I ate like bacon with it. The difference there was my workouts were a little flat. I started to really drag ass. Like I was forcing myself into it. Whereas with fruit, I feel very energized.
You know, citing things about how unhealthy he was ultimately on that strict flesh-only diet.
Empirically is, since, like, you know, what I always felt when I was a vegan is I like the fucking, excuse my language, taste of meat. So I was always eating.
So I just want to note, you know, the taste of meat isn't something that like vegans just, or plant-based eaters automatically lose. You know, I ate a ton of barbecue. I talk about this in Christspiracy, that I myself was a fisherman and a hunter. I was a part of a Christian youth hunting club. You know, I loved the taste of meat when I was eating it. But the point is asking yourself the question, does pleasure, such in this case as taste pleasure, justify abusing, exploiting, killing another sentient being when you don't have to? You know, we would use the same logic and justify sexually abusing someone just because it made us feel good. You know, that's what the argument that he's using here is.
Like, I was a sucker for all that Beyond stuff, which I now kind of would regard as a sort of a globalist, imperialist, consumer, like, scam. Like, you know, I liked all that fake meat. I was always chomping down on a Linda McCartney sausage, the late wife of the great Beatle Paul McCartney. They had a brand of vegetarian sausages. I was making these bizarre concoctions to get, like, some sort of paste that had meatiness to it.
Yeah, so when you're transitioning into a lifestyle where you're abstaining from eating animal flesh, there is this tendency while you transition to want to eat things like Beyond Meat or meat replacements because you still want that kind of texture. That's something I've long passed. I hardly ever eat that stuff. You don't have to eat that stuff. And in fact, there is a really good argument that it's not the most healthy thing you can eat because it is somewhat processed, right? It's better to eat whole foods, plant-based. But I do think that centering the conversation so often around these plant-based substitutes is a whole other side of the agenda of really trying to demonize people who are choosing to abstain from killing and abusing other animals by making it out as if they're joining in on some global cabal's plan to make everyone eat bugs or to, you know, eat Soylent Green or whatever, when that's just not the case. Most people who live this lifestyle, including myself, primarily eat whole foods, plant-based diets. That means fruits, grains, veggies, and we do just fine. We don't really need those processed foods.
Now, I still have the kind of moral quandaries, but I suppose that's sort of separate from diet. And in a way, what is morally and ethically suggested is that you should be eating meat that is reared locally and killed respectfully.
Russell, how do you kill an animal respectfully? That's all I'll say about that. I'm just curious if you have a literal way that you can describe that makes it respectful when you kill the animal. Like, what is it literally that you're doing? That's the question of Christspiracy. Is there a spiritual, ethical, respectful, humane, right, all these buzzwords, way to kill an animal? And if so, what is it? We've asked so many people and we haven't been able to get a straightforward answer. So, Russell, if by chance you're watching this, or Carnivore MD, let us know. Post a comment. What's the respectful way to kill an animal?
Even though death is always terrible and there's something brutal about, you know, death, life eats death. That's the price, man. And like making those universal claims in this climate seems somehow to be challenging.
I mean, I read this book when I was younger. It was called The Tracker. This Native American elder told Tom Brown something, that in order for something to live, something else must die.
So this circle of life, in order for something to live, something has to die, is actually a fallacy, in that you don't have to kill a plant to eat it. In fact, if you eat a fruit from a tree, you're actually not only not killing the parent tree, but you're encouraging further life by spreading the seed of the fruit. It's a symbiotic relationship that's developed with humans over time, who are pretty much frugivorous beings, like our closest genetic relatives, the apes and chimpanzees and whatnot. But even if you go beyond fruits to leafy greens, you don't have to actually kill a head of lettuce or kale to eat it. You can chop it and prune it and get what you need and leave the rootstock there. And the pruning will actually encourage the plant to grow that much more robust that much stronger. In fact, scripture all the time talks about pruning and how good it is. And then even if you go to root vegetables like carrots and potatoes, you would think, oh, well, now you're killing it because you're pulling the root out of the ground. But some of you may be aware that if you save the shard of the top of the carrot or the eye of the potato and you replant those, they'll grow back. So it's actually truly regenerative agriculture. You know, animal agriculture loves using the buzzword regenerative these days, but it's not truly regenerative because you can't cut the limb off of a cow and it grow back in the same way that you can cut a carrot and it grows back. So no, you don't have to kill. Life doesn't have to consume death in order to survive. That's not the way it was designed. It was designed perfectly.
I think that we have it because we are removed from nature. If you and I were in a tribe in the jungle here in Costa Rica or in the forest of, you know, the northern United States where Native Americans were, wherever, we would not have an ethical qualm about eating meat.
Okay, so I have to address the fact that Paul Saladino lives in Costa Rica. I actually met him down in Costa Rica because I spent a lot of time there surfing, especially during COVID to escape all the lockdowns and all of that. And I actually ran into Paul Saladino. And when I learned that he was buying a house there, I was shocked because, as many know, like the Liver King, Paul also loves eating bull testicles.
This is why you might just want to eat testicle. I'm about to get out for a surf in Costa Rica. This is a raw bull testicle. This is how we get ready to surf in Costa Rica. We just get it.
And he loves eating bull testicles in Costa Rica, a country that's famous or infamous for losing 50 to 60% of its rainforest historically to cattle farming. And every single set of bull testicles comes from one cow, which consumes or destroys up to 2 acres of rainforest every year. So Paul is literally destroying the rainforest one sack of balls at a time and encouraging billions of others to do so.
We would not have an ethical qualm about eating meat. What we would do is we would hunt it respectfully. And because we hunted it, we would eat it from nose to tail. We would eat all of the organs. We would eat the bone marrow. We would use the hide and the hooves. And we would eat all of the animal. We would waste nothing. And we would be very grateful to this sort of cycle of life. You know, all of these sort of indigenous tribes have some sort of cosmology. They all see themselves as something, a part of something bigger, right? We've lost that. You go to the grocery store, you have a disembodied steak, and we've lost, dare I say, the spirituality of eating meat. It was part of.
So, okay, so there's a lot to unpack in that one. First of all, sure, we can be grateful for our meals, but what's not being considered here is how the animal feels. Do you think the animal is grateful that its life was taken to feed you unnecessarily? It's a big question. Secondly, I'll agree with him that when you go to the grocery store, you're witnessing this dismembered body part of an animal, and we're really disconnected from that, and in a way, spiritually disconnected from that. But I don't know that everyone would draw the same conclusion that Carnivore MD here is, that this disconnection is why we should become more spiritual about eating meat or even calling meat a sacrament. The last time I checked in the Holy Orthodox Church, a sacrament is communion, which is bread and wine or the juice of grapes representing the Last Supper of Jesus, which famously was supposed to be a Passover where a Passover lamb flesh was served. However, Jesus replaced that with the this is my meat, my flesh of bread, and this is my blood instead of the blood of lamb, the grape juice. We talk about this at length, not only in Christspiracy, but in a video that I did on the Last Supper and the Passover. I'll put the link to that video below.
Perhaps, it may sound overblown, but it's sacramental in some ways.
And I just have to note again, this language of the spirituality of eating meat, I think is uncanny in its timing, that it's becoming so prominent in the cultural zeitgeist online with the Biblio diet, and now this conversation, Jordan Peterson constantly talking about spiritual meat eating and this and that. You really see in the Christian conservative movement with patriotism in America and everything really moving towards this trad wife, meat eating, beef tallow kind of thing. And I don't think this is a coincidence. I think that the conversation that's being stirred around, say, the film Christspiracy, but also other people asking these same questions around the world, is not lost on the meat industry, who has historically created all kinds of campaigns to diminish populations' desire to go more plant-based in order to encourage consuming their products.
And the other thing I would mention here is that I think that as much as humans have an ethical imperative to sort of participate in that cycle of life and understand and respect the nutrients that these animals give us and to live accordingly, I think that as humans, and I think this, this is sort of a Christian perspective, like our purpose is also to do the most good in the world. And so how do you do the most good in the world? How are you the best conduit for the ideas that you believe need to go into the world? You need to nourish yourself, right? You need to nourish your brain and your body. And so I've always thought eating meat is part of supporting myself. I do a lot of things in my life.
It is a very Christian idea to do the most good in the world and to treat others the way that we want to be treated. And in that kind of exchange of the golden rule axiom of Jesus, what he says is the greatest commandment, that we do have to take care of ourselves in order to do the best for others. We can't really help others if we're not doing well. But the big question is, are we really taking care of ourselves and following the golden rule if it's at the expense of others, or does that completely invert the whole truth and principle itself?
I sort of see so many aspects of my life as sacred, and I want to protect this vessel. I don't drink, I don't smoke. I think about these things. I try to get good sleep, like I'm trying to be a good vessel for something bigger than me, for something in the world, and to put ideas into the world that help people. And so nutrition is a part of that. And I think you've seen that now. And so there is this other ethical side of it that, hey, if you are a more lit up human, if you are a more energetic, clear thinking human, you're doing good in the world. That's really, I think, a very high purpose for these animals in your life. They're nourishing you and you're putting it back into the world.
So again, he's playing on this golden rule idea, but he's really keeping it more self-centered. It's all about me, and it's not really considering the animal's perspective. The whole point of the golden rule is it's a deep philosophical device that helps you empathize. It helps you get out of yourself and think about others. You want to treat others the way you want to be treated, so you can put yourself in the other's position. And he's not really doing that. He's just saying, these animals are serving a purpose by being my food and making me feel better. But how does the animal feel? And whatever it is that the animal's feeling in this exchange, is that something that you yourself, Paul, would want to feel, or you yourself, Russell? Do we want to be treated in that way, which we're a commodity to serve the purpose of fueling another being? What if another species came from outer space, or what if AI someday decides, hey, you know what? Humans would really serve a good purpose by being our fuel. This is the story of the Matrix. And that's why it's such a powerful phenomenon, that movie, because it really paints the picture of this idea that AI alarmists have said, such as Ben Gortzel, who said that if AI treats us the way we treat pigs, then we're screwed.
In the mind of the first superintelligence, we're not setting the best example in terms of the way human society is being regulated right now, nor the way we treat non-human life forms on the planet. What if the AI treats us the way we treat less intelligent animals? We want them to be more compassionate to us than we are to each other.
When AI becomes super intelligence and it's learning its intelligence and modeling it after us, it's going to treat lesser life forms the same way we treat lesser life forms. It's going to learn from us. So if we're the lesser intelligent species, when AI becomes super intelligence, if it ever does, then we might want to go ahead and start thinking about cleaning up our act so that the AI follows the golden rule and leaves us alone.
These are excellent points, and I think your early remark that we are detached from nature is an important one, that we've been decoupled from a deep reality that we have to live in harmony with because of recent deep education into how systems of control operate. I know that whether it's the choice that was made to use blue light instead of red light behind these screens, or any number of nutritional choices. I know that what you talk about, a kind of nutritional state of subjugation, is what's required by the systems that seek to emulate and counterfeit the divine power that you're describing. It's not an accident, but deliberate. It's deliberate that you eat food that makes you tired and bloated and ineffective.
I agree with Russell on this, that there is, I think, intentionality behind certain foods in certain lifestyles being pushed in our face to have a certain effect on, the lower echelons of humanity. I don't want to get too conspiracy theorist on this particular response video, but it's evident that there is massive lobbying power and massive money to be made within the animal agriculture industry. And not only that, more importantly, the drip down effect of money to be made from those who become sick from these types of foods with colon cancer. And like I said before, the whole pharmaceutical vaccination industry, which is built off of the back of zoonotic disease and all of this. It's a big, massive money-making machine, and there is definitely an incentive to push the masses to consume animal products in this way.
It's a very sinister reality that we're living in if there are powers that be that are actually trying to subjugate us and make us dumber. It's very possible. And as far as the food goes, yeah, we can talk about this too. I don't know. I think that nourished humans are likely to be free-thinking humans, and free-thinking humans are a little more difficult to control than tired and humans that are just fatigued.
I agree. Humans thinking clearly is definitely a threat to the system. And the big question is, how clear is one thinking when charged up with blood ritual flesh consumption versus the actual original diet from Scripture, if you're talking in scriptural sense, or from a biological or scientific sense, the most species-specific diet that we can eat based off of the fact that our closest ancestors, apes and chimpanzees, are fully frugivorous and consuming a plant-based diet. The way that our teeth works, the way that our digestive system works, sure, we can eat meat. We can. We can also eat glass and steel. There are, multiple Guinness Book of World Records people who have eaten all of these horrific kinds of things, and the body can actually process it. But is it ideal for the body? That's a different question. Also, I feel like he's implying here that people who eat only plants are tired and they're not thinking very well or clearly or freely, but that goes against data big time. I mean, some of the greatest thinkers of all time, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci, the list goes on and on and on. They all abstained from animal flesh, and they attributed even their clarity of thought and their creativity to these practices. So it doesn't really hold water what he's saying here.
I don't want to get too technical here, but the way that we make energy as humans is we harvest electrons from the food that we eat. We pass those electrons through a transport chain in the inner mitochondrial membrane of every cell of our body except the red blood cells.
I love in this whole breakdown that he's giving about methylene blue and why he doesn't take it. He talks about ATP and electrons moving through food systems in our body to create energy and vitality in the body. There's such a great argument for the fact that you get the most photon light energy directly from eating plant foods rather than having a middleman like a cow or a chicken or a pig who's consuming the plant foods, and then you're consuming them in a dead form through eating their, decaying flesh, when you could go straight to the source of the vibrant fruit straight off the tree and get that same energy exchange directly to your bloodstream.
Enjoyed very much your description of the elegance of the mitochondrial system. I feel the approximate awe of a heavenly creator. I think such complexity could not occur as a result of randomized events, even over billions of years. The hallmark and presence of God is evident in all God's creation, and I am just in awe.
I love that he's bringing this all back to the idea of an intelligent creator and God and his own faith. So I want to just challenge Russell again, go to Genesis 1:29 and look at God's original design for humanity and the original food that humanity was supposed to eat. It says very clearly in Genesis 1:29, in God's ideal of the Garden of Eden, humans were to eat fruits and seed-bearing plants. Full stop. And even in the kingdom of heaven, which is what Jesus declared is in our midst, and prayed that that will be done on earth as it is in heaven, also according to Isaiah 11, Revelation 22:2, is a system with no more slaughter, where we return to that same frugivorous and plant-based eating.
I've sort of changed my agenda in the course of just the first 20 minutes to I'm going to need to maximally benefit from this time that I have with Paul, because I remember you saying before, like, even if you only ate McDonald's meat, that's better than not eating meat at all. That's one of the things that kind of struck me.
So this is a crazy claim. Even if you were to eat McDonald's meat, you'd be better off than not eating meat at all. But again, I want to point to a conversation that I had with Dr. Narco Longo on the Old World Florida podcast, where we did a full 5-hour live stream about the connection of fast food, cannibalism, secret societies, and blood ritual sacrifice. I know that sounds crazy and super conspiratorial, but the reality is there are these deep connections with the origins of the KKK and the Freemasons and the onset of all of the fast food chains that we have, and this connection with clowns and cannibalism that goes all the way back to ancient times in this milieu of everything that has to do with organizations like McDonald's. So I find it bizarre that I constantly see these carnivores who are saying that they're pushing, grass-fed beef and this and that, actually promoting fast food restaurants like McDonald's as well. I just recently debated Carnivore Ray on the Ellen Fisher podcast, which is coming out soon, and he promotes eating McDonald's all the time.
I'm okay with this. Ray, that's not quality beef. Shut up.
So I'll let you guys do with that what you will. Do you think that we should be eating McDonald's in copious amounts?
So you and Bear Grylls were probably the most significant influences in me deciding to start eating meat. And it was kind of concomitant with my coming to Christ as well.
I love that he brought up Bear Grylls as well, because I want to reemphasize that Bear Grylls not only is another one of these examples of a recent Christian convert promoting meat eating heavily, and how much of a twisted cover-up this is, knowing the 2,000-year-old history of the earliest Christians who, again, Eusebius, the father of church history, said all the original apostles abstained from flesh. James, the brother of Jesus, who led the original movement of the Nazarenes, the first Christians, also abstained from flesh from birth. And even the oldest secular record of Pliny the Younger records in 111 AD that the Christians, the Christiani, were actually meeting and eating innocent and harmless food, and that they were shutting down local slaughterhouses and meat markets because of this. So everywhere that you turn, you have this ancient religious Christian tradition that is completely antithetical to this wave that we see of what Russell Brand is speaking about here and Bear Grylls. And ironically, I don't really feel like they're enjoying it that much.
Paul Saladino, who turns up with that is a raw bull's testicle.
In fact, again, it's been documented that Bear Grylls was fed cow testicles from Carnivore MD, and the grimace on his face is just priceless. He definitely didn't feel like he was enjoying it.
Truly terrible. And then a bit of raw liver. It's not that bad. Here we go.
I'm so quite actually interestingly, having listened to the earlier part of the conversation when you were talking about the sacraments and sanctity, with the idea of the flesh and the blood of Christ, that there is some kind of spiritual correlative to this incontrovertibly, not incontrovertibly, but somehow inextricably.
So again, this whole metaphor that he's using for the Eucharist, for communion in the flesh and blood of Christ, and somehow drawing this analogy to how it represents this carnal nature of what we have to eat and consume in regards to animals and their flesh and blood, that is a complete inversion of the original meaning of the Last Supper and the communion and the Eucharist that Jesus brought forth. Animal sacrifice and blood ritual ended at that moment. He was performing this act during the Passover when lambs were meant to be slaughtered and put on the table and eaten, and no gospel has any record of him consuming flesh. In fact, the earliest gospel of the Hebrews, attested to by 12 or more of the early church fathers as the original Matthew, penned by Matthew himself and used by the first Nazarenes, is quoted stating that Jesus said, "I have no desire to eat the flesh of this Passover lamb with you." So Jesus, in the earliest records, directly opposed that tradition and replaced it with the bread and the grape juice of the Eucharist. So what we're seeing here with this connection that in metaphor that Russell is drawing is a complete inversion, which is, if anything, anti-Christ in a way, because anything that's inverted from Christ's original intention would be anti-Christ, which in effect is demonic.
What should be the role of Make America Healthy Again? What should be the role of government in facing up to big food, big agriculture, and, you know, I guess big pharma as well, of course, but like...
I love that he's talking about MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, right off the back of talking about Christianity, because it's time that we start the new wave, make Christians vegan again. That's where I'm at. Russell himself was once a vegetarian vegan, and he's gone down this inverted path. But let's see what he talks about in terms of the MAHA movement and how government needs to be reformed in terms of agricultural and food policy, and see how it aligns with actual Christian values.
If we lived, like, just you explaining to me as an individual, well, this is what you should feed your children, I'm immediately thinking, don't give your children anything other than organic whole food. Probably there's got to be some supplementation. Aren't we, like, ultimately poisoning and toxifying ourselves at beyond an industrial level, almost at a universal level?
Absolutely, we are, and it sounds hyperbolic when we say it, or it sounds inflammatory, but it's really, I think it's really true. I think evil. Yeah. I think I've begun to see it like this, Russell. I've begun to see it as like there are foods that are for humans and there are foods that are not for humans. And if you eat food for humans, which I would define as single ingredient foods, so meat and plants, right? Single ingredient foods, milk, eggs, fish, chicken.
Okay, food for humans. If we're talking about Christianity, MAHA, America as a Christian nation, we got to talk about make Christians vegan again, because they were in the book of Genesis. That is the origins of the story of the way that God created humanity. He's saying here, Carnivore MD, that human food is plants and animals, but that is not scripturally accurate. Human food was originally fruits and herb-bearing seed, okay? So there is, from a Christian perspective, a complete inversion happening here again. And I hope that Russell can open his Bible and see this, that from the kingdom of heaven to the Garden of Eden, the beginning and end of the text, that the ideal is very clear. God never intended for slaughter. Animals were never a part of the menu.
I'm not trying to take away things from people or make it impossible. So the Food for Humans framework is quite broad. But I want people to understand this. I strongly believe, and this is something that I am so passionate about at this moment in my life and my career, and I think this is in line with the MAHA movement. The Western medical system will not tell you this, but I believe that if you eat food for humans, you can correct or reverse the majority of chronic illness that we suffer from as humans today.
So if we're talking about MAHA and government and the food system, we have to address subsidies. That is money used to subsidize industries, and it comes from us. It comes from the taxpayer. So when we're thinking about conservative values, Christian values, a lot of time we talk about free market capitalism. We talk about, low taxation, etc. How are we in the same breath advocating for these principles, yet the animal agriculture industry is using our tax-paid dollars, which we are taxed out of the wazoo for, and spending it in the billions to subsidize animal agriculture because it is an inefficient system? There's literally government cheese sitting underground in basements rotting away because of all the taxpayer dollars that have gone into subsidizing the dairy industry. And on the flip side, most of the plant-based agriculture that is subsidized goes to feed animals, and the little bit that does go to feed humans is being subsidized in the hundreds of millions compared to these billions and billions of the animal agriculture industry, creating a system where there's just no room to innovate. You know, even plant-based agriculture could be better. To Carnivore MD's point, you know, corn and soy and glyphosate and all of these monocrop systems aren't ideal, but they could be made better if we shifted all of those government subsidies towards plant-based agriculture so that smaller growers can innovate. We can use food forestry systems. We can do permaculture. We can become more organic and find different ways to innovate so we don't need so many pesticides, etc. So if you're going to talk Maha and if you're going to talk government and all of these Christian values, this is a major issue that has to be addressed. Our money is not being properly spent.
Paul, I wanted to run you through some of my new products from Reborn and to get your absolute insight. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of variation in this, so like, you know, as far, I just mean in general, the product, bovine colostrum. Is that a good idea?
Here we go. It all makes sense now. Russell is launching Reborn, his animal-based supplement products, just like Carnivore MD and Liver King does. So, hey, you know, everybody's got to make money, but at the end of the day, when you're pushing a message that sells a product, one has to ask a question: what are the intentions behind this?
Aren't we ultimately poisoning and toxifying ourselves?
Absolutely, we are. Will not tell you this. Did I lose you?
No, Paul, I wanted to run you through some of my new products from Reborn. Reborn! Everything's leading to our Lord to being reborn. We are going to glorify his name, but I need your support. You know I've got a trial next year, so support me in the best way you can by acquiring these glorious new products of mine. Beef tallow, baby. Mwah! It's only for cooking, don't use it in massages. Tallow balm, look at me. Young, rejuvenated. Look at these abs. Look at these guys. Bovine colostrum. That's the sweet first fruits of the udder. Why wait around till the calf has sucked out all of the best bits? Bovine colostrum.
So Russell is not only launching his own animal-based supplement company with colostrum and tallow, but he's also selling creatine powder, the very nutrient that Carnivore MD was ranting on about being present in all animal foods.
Nutrients that are central to human thriving. Things like creatine, which gets a lot of press today, but...
So if it's so present in animal foods, why do you have to take creatine powder? What's going on?
In order for you to get 5 grams of creatine a day, you'd have to eat probably 2 pounds of meat per day. Most of us are not eating 2 pounds of meat per day. So it's a valuable compound that is made by the body, but supplementation appears to be very beneficial for humans, and it's incredibly safe.
So he's literally making the argument that most plant-based eaters make around supplementation, in that if you want to have certain goals or meet certain goals, if you're a weightlifter or if you've got certain cognition goals that you have or whatever, eating certain foods in the amounts to get copious amounts of, say, creatine or whatever is just unrealistic. He's telling you right now that most people can't eat 2 pounds of meat per day to get just 5 grams of creatine, so they supplement. It's not a big deal. If you feel like you're missing something from your diet that you're consuming, if you're consuming a plant-based diet, it's super simple just to supplement with it. Everybody does it, including animal-based eaters. They're literally admitting it to you. So it's completely hypocritical to point out what particular supplements that someone on a plant-based diet may be eating, or that there's certain amino acids missing from certain plant foods when you can literally get them from other plant foods or just supplement. It's not a big deal.
If you want to watch the rest of this, you're going to have to click the link in the description. We're not doing it on YouTube no more. I don't trust them.
And after this creatine moment, the free YouTube stream actually jumps to Rumble, which I'm not going to go to and spend my time on right this moment. So that's the end of this stream. But let me know in the comments if you want me to keep going. I can go get on the Rumble channel and break down some more of the arguments that are happening there and see what's actually being discussed. But in the meantime, I really hope that everyone can, you know, just think a little bit more deeply about this push from these influencers like Carnivore MD, like Liver King, or like these Christian homesteaders and people that you see out there that are literally pushing organ harvesting and blood drinking, some of them, and they're calling, you know, plant-based eating, veganism demonic, while they're literally drinking and consuming blood, which is a part of a cult ritual. It's completely inverted. So consider these things. Maybe tag Russell on some of the social media, get him to watch this video. We really want to have a conversation with him. In the past, he expressed interest in wanting to watch Christspiracy and actually have discussions about the Gospels and eating animals and what the Christian understanding is again. And so we want to be able to share with him that it's all about making Christians vegan again, or at least moving in that direction to understanding that God created us to be in harmony with God's creatures and to treat them the way that we want to be treated ourselves. So on that note, if you haven't seen Christspiracy, go check it out. It's free on our website. We go deep into this question of if there is a spiritual way to kill animals and what Jesus and the original Nazarene movement had to say about that, as well as exploring other religious traditions like the Hindu tradition, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, to see how they all view the ethical question around how we kill animals and even the hypocrisy present across the board in all religion. It's a conversation whose time has come, so watch the film if you haven't yet and come back here and join us in uncovering the truth.
Is there a right way to kill a beast? Justified imagery of blood on the streets. Then a thief. What's the right way to kill a beast?